I'm talking about the word Nazi, N-A-Z-I. It's actually a short form for National Socialist. National for national and Socialist, Sozialist. And if you abbreviate that, which was very useful in terms of political discussions, the opponents would say, oh, they are the Nazis. It was used at the time as part of the political discussion, and it was from the beginning more or less a negative word to brand the National Socialists. And the political parties who were not Nazis were of course against all the Nazis stood for: racism, authoritarian leadership, hierarchy of this kind of political parties, radicalism, violence in the political process. The National Socialist, the Nazi Party, was a quite modern party, and people at the time when there was no TV, not a lot of radio, that was quite exciting. It was a negative word for all those, of course, who did not see themselves as Nazis, because the word Nazi stood for violence, radicalism, anti-Semitism, and the Nazis themselves were quite proud of being regarded as that. They would describe themselves as National Socialists, and they would always point out that National Socialism is an ideology which is a complete description and analysis of the present state of mankind. One became a member of the party at the beginning of the political movement only if you were convinced of this, more or less. People were following this party in the 1920s because they thought, this is the ideology which I believe and I share these views, and therefore I become a member of the National Socialist Party and I'm a Nazi. Later, particularly after 1930-33, a lot of people became members of the Nazi Party, NSDAP, because they thought it might be good for their political career. And that was the reason why in 1933, in May, the party stopped to take on new members. The numbers had exploded in the previous months after Hitler had become Chancellor in January 1933, and so they put a stop to this, and only in 1937 they reopened the party.
What happened? What happened to the Nazis?
Yeah, that's a very good question. What happened to the Nazis after 1945? Overall, there had been 10 million members of the Nazi Party, and in 1945 a few left the party, others died, but overall the estimate is that about 8 million Germans in 1945 were members of the Nazi Party. No one would admit that he had been a Nazi, and there was no one left, no Nazis left. But of course these Nazis were still there, and the high-ranking Nazis were put on trial in Nuremberg. Some of them were hanged, others were brought into prison for some years. And the Allies who had occupied Germany tried to identify as many Nazis as possible. And for a few years this denazification, as it was called, shaped the relationship between the Allies and the Germans. But as soon as the 1950s started, one could say a lot of the denazification was abandoned in favor of reintegration of these people to build up the new country. When you today hear the word Nazi, it's most of the time the word neo-Nazi. There are certain groups at the fringes of society, right-wing extremists, who call themselves neo-national socialists, who have a racist agenda. Even 65 years after the end of the war, the Third Reich is still a point to reflect on. You know, how could this happen? Why did this happen? What were the consequences? What do we have to do to prevent anything like that happen again, not only in Germany but in general? The term Nazi is much more used in Britain than in Germany, because here it's a certain brand for all sorts of things, including assumed German characteristics, from football to perhaps aggressiveness, fighting on the beaches of Mallorca or something like that. Germans, I would assume, would not use this term so frequently, so easily as people do it here, because Germans would immediately think about the wider connotations. That's how you are educated, that's how you reflect on this. And it's a serious term in Germany, and one wouldn't use it just in everyday language just to make a joke or something like that.